Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business program presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Listen weekday mornings to Ken and Matt on the WGAN Morning News. Eggs and Issues is supported by presenting sponsors Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare in cooperation with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, First Light Fiber, and WEX. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber of Commerce President Jack Lufkin.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out today. We've got a great presentation. As mentioned before, I'm Jack Lufkin. I'm with KeyBank, and I'm the current volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to another, what will be a fantastic season of Eggs and Issues. The Portland Community Chamber puts this on, and I think is probably the premier networking and business issues forum in the state, but that's just my opinion. Now, I hope everybody had a great summer, and let's pause for a moment and give ourselves a round of applause for Bon Appetit naming Portland, Maine Restaurant City of the Year. I know my credit card was responsible for a good portion of that, so again, thank you. So we do have a great program here today. In a minute, I'm going to be welcoming up Tony Payne, who is the chair of our Portland Regional Chambers Advocacy Committee. And we're going to be hearing from a couple of speakers as they talk about and educate you and debate Maine's question 1, which is the universal home care referendum. First of all, a little bit of a chamber business. Who would love to just sign up once for all the chamber Eggs and Issues events? Wouldn't that be much easier? Well, you can sign up for a season pass. Not only does that get you attendance at all the Eggs and Issues, but it will get you attendance at all the Kegs and Issues, as well as our annual event in January. So you can do that with chamber staff out front. You can do it through the website, so don't miss out on it. It's quite a savings. So wonderful. So speaking of Kegs and Issues, our very first speaker this year is going to be James Morin, the Chief Operating Officer over at Flowfold. And hopefully you've heard of Flowfold. It's a fantastic company. They started out making wallets, and their product has been just phenomenally well received, and they've expanded their product line, have a great relationship now with LL Bean, marketing the main brand outside of the state. So wonderful. So that'll be a great event, so please do sign up for that. So. Also, January is not far off, and sorry, I know it's lovely weather outside, but we do have our annual event coming up, and it's important that we make sure we hear from you so that we're recognizing people who are making important contributions in the community. So the Chamber is now accepting nominations, and we will provide a link in the follow-up email, but please do be on the lookout for that, and please be thinking of your colleagues and your businesses and recognize them at our event. Moving on, I'd like to recognize and welcome our newest members to the Chamber. The following organizations have joined the Chamber in the past month. We've had 41 new members join the Chamber. Normally we list each business, but we can only do their logos. It's a fantastic joining, a fantastic month for Chamber membership. We welcome you. And let's take a minute to congratulate our new chamber members. Now I'd like to take a moment to recognize our generous sponsors without whom we could not bring these programs. Our presenting sponsors are Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Our cooperating sponsors are Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, WEX, and First Light. Our reception sponsors are Veril Dana, Clark Insurance, KeyBank, and our parking sponsor is CV and Mahar Engineers. And of course, Headlight Audio Visual does a fantastic job providing us with our overall production support. The Forecaster is our print sponsor, Maine Biz is our e-media partner, WGAN is our radio sponsor, and WMTW TV is our broadcast sponsor. We'd also like to thank our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Spectrum Healthcare, the University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. AAA Northern New England and Springborn Staffing provides support for our Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs programs. That allows area high school and college students to attend Eggs and Issues. This is typically a very difficult, school just began, very difficult one to get folks in attendance, but I think today we have folks in attendance from Gorham High School, USM, and Southern Maine Community College. So if you're here, please stand, wave your arm or something to be recognized. Let's recognize our newest members. The Portland Public Library is our FMI for More Information sponsor, and we'll provide a link later on after this program so that you can find out more information about today's topic. Baker Newman and Noyes sponsors our Community Corner program, and this month's Community Corner is the Maine Children's Home for Little Wanderers. The organization reaches out to more than 3,200 families and children from throughout the state of Maine every year. Their mission is to build and strengthen families and children, instilling hope for the future and a better quality of life. As a safety net for some of Maine's most vulnerable population, Maine's Home for Little Wanderers provides a safe, healthy, and respectful environment where families are encouraged to thrive. The Maine Children's Home has been successfully providing family support, counseling, social work, and adoption services in Maine since, and I did fact check this, 1899. So with us today from the Maine Children's Home for Little Wanderers, we have Val Schmidt, Kelly Couture, Sammy Sturdivant, Lindsay Bragdon, and Rick Dorian. Thank you very much for being here. And I always forget something, but I do want to recognize a couple of folks in the audience today that we're thankful that we have. This is a Portland Community Chamber event. We're always glad when our Portland City Councilors are attending. So today we have Councilor Jill Duson and Mayor Ethan Strimling. Thank you for coming. Now, let's get on to the presentation. As a reminder, today we have 3 microphones set up around the room. There will be a debate. It'll be moderated by Tony Payne. I'll bring him up to the stage in a moment. When we do get to the question and answer period, if you could make your questions succinct as opposed to making position statements, say your name and organization if you represent one, and please say your question. That way we can get to as many as possible. So today I'd like to bring up to the stage Tony Payne. Tony is the Senior Vice President of External Affairs at MEMIC, and Tony will welcome our 2 guest panelists who are Newell Auger, representing No on One Stop the Scam, and Ben Chin, representing Mainers for Home Care. Without further ado, Tony.
Good morning. I've rehearsed this a dozen times, but bear with me. So it's my pleasure to be today's moderator for question 1, a proposal to fund universal home care in the state of Maine. In full disclosure, I am a member of the Chamber's Board of Directors and chair of the Regional Chamber's Advocacy Committee. The Chamber Board has voted to oppose question 1, but for purposes of this morning's discussion, we're simply providing a forum for both sides of this issue to explain their reasoning, educate you on the proposal, and attempt to persuade you to cast your vote in their favor. My job is to keep the discussion moving and keep the guardrails in place. Question 1 on the November ballot is one of 5 ballot questions, by the way, you'll face in your local voting booth. The other questions being 2 bond issues for higher education, supporting the University of Maine system and the community college system. Yeah. That's not an endorsement, Glenn. And 2 for improvements to the state's infrastructure. Before I welcome our guests, let me read the question you will have to decide on November 6th, as well as a summary that appears on ballotpedia.org, one of my favorite resources for good, objective information. The question on the ballot asks, do you want to create the Universal Home Care Program to provide home-based assistance to people with disabilities and senior citizens, regardless of income, funded by a new 3.8% tax on individuals and families with Maine wage and adjusted gross income above the amount subject to Social Security taxes, which is $128,400 in 2018. According to Ballotpedia, the Universal Home Care Program would be designed to provide long-term health care and social services to adults of 65 years of age or older, or those with physical and mental disabilities in their homes at no cost to the individuals or their families. Question 1 would establish a Universal Home Care Trust Fund Board to oversee and manage funds for the program. The board would be composed of 9 members, including 3 members who represent personal care agencies, 3 members who are providers of in-home care services and employees of care services, and 3 members who are receiving in-home care services or their family members of individuals receiving those in-home care services. The board would be prohibited from taking income into account in determining who receives in-home care services as part of the program. However, the board will be permitted to create waiting lists of eligible persons if demand exceeds the board's ability to provide meaningful benefits to eligible persons according to the initiative's language. So there's a lot to be discussed, and I'm going to invite our guests to the stage. Ben Chin. Ben is representing Mainers for Home Care and is the Deputy Director of the Maine People's Alliance. Ben is a resident of Lewiston and a graduate of Bates College. Joining him is Newell Auger. Newell is representing the No on Question 1 Stop the Scam campaign. He is an independent government relations professional in Augusta and a graduate of Georgetown University and the Boston College School of Law. Welcome and thank you both for being with us. You each have 3 minutes for an opening statement, a very concise 3 minutes. Then we'll take questions from the audience, and then you'll have 2 minutes at the end for closing remarks. As the proponent, Ben, let me ask you to go first.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you to the Portland Chamber for having us here today. It's a little bit unusual for me to be asked to speak to an organization after they've already chosen to endorse the other side, but we decided to accept this invitation for 2 reasons. I'm not going to try to convince a critical mass of you here to change your mind. Sort of by definition, that's already happened. But I think, 1, there probably are some people in the room who would like to have a little bit more information to make up their mind. So that's goal 1. And 2, I want to make sure we have a conversation about the future of our state. Because I think no matter where you are, you realize that we have many problems that we are facing, many challenges as the oldest state in the nation. So in 10 years, about 1 out of 4 Mainers are going to be over the age of 65. There are wait lists for people who have disabilities to receive the services they need. A nursing home, which Medicare does not cover, costs over $100,000 a year on average, and full-time home care, while cheaper, still exceeds the median income for Maine families at over $50,000 a year. Now, I just talked to a York County small business owner who's having to choose between redeveloping a mill, which is her dream, and caring for her aging mother. I've talked to agencies with reimbursement rates so low from our Medicaid system that they actually can't attract the workers they need. And I've talked to workers who work full-time but still don't make enough money in this industry that they can actually qualify for food stamps and Section 8 housing. Finally, over the last 8 years, while the rest of the country has gone in the right direction, talk a little quieter?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay. So while the rest of the country is going in the right direction, we actually have a higher percentage of Mainers in nursing homes now than 8 years ago. And that is the wrong direction we need to go. That's why we need to have a system of universal home care. Now, the rub of this is obviously taxes. And the 2 facts I want you to keep in mind are, 1, when you add up all the taxes people make, sales, income, property, excise, etc., the wealthiest in Maine already have the lowest tax rate out of any income group in the state. We've given over $400 million away in tax breaks for the wealthy. It is impossible to continue that unsustainable fiscal policy. Please vote yes on 1.
Thank you. Newell, we're at 28:35. Go.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks to all of you for being here this morning to learn a little bit more about question one and why it would be so disastrous to Maine's economy, but also to the long-term care continuum in our state, which actually probably ranks as one of the top, in the top second tier in the entire United States. Question one would be bad for families. It would be bad for Maine seniors. It would be bad for independent home care workers, and it would be just bad government. And let me unpack that a little bit for you. Bad for our economy and Maine families because if question one passes, 60,000 additional Maine families will be paying the highest income tax rate in the nation at 10.95%. That's double what Massachusetts pays. New Hampshire has no income tax. And the state economists just recently did a comprehensive review of the fiscal impact of this tax. We would stand to lose in excess of $1.6 billion in personal income over the next 5 years in this state, and a net loss to our state GDP of about $750 million. This question one is also bad for Maine seniors because buried in a provision of this proposal is language that would take their private health information and distribute it to hundreds, if not thousands, of people without their permission. Bad for independent home care workers because also buried in this provision, and you would not see it in the question, is a provision that makes those individual home care workers state employees for the purposes of collective bargaining without any state employee benefits. And just bad government, basically. It's not this 9-member board that's going to administer $310 million of taxpayer funds is unelected by the taxpayers paying for the program and unaccountable to any state agency or to the state legislature. And that's why I am very proud to be part of this coalition, No on One coalition, made up of tens of thousands of individuals and small mom and pop businesses across the state who are the backbone of our economy, who are working to oppose this question. But if that isn't enough for you, take note of the fact that every one of the 4 gubernatorial candidates are opposed to this. They do not want this on their desk in January, and neither should you.
Very good. Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions, and we're going to see if we can get a conversation going here. And again, if you are thinking about this issue and have questions, not statements, please grab any one of the 3 microphones when we get there. We're going to be taking questions around 8:40. We may wrap up a little earlier, but let's have a really good, robust discussion so you can understand what this proposal is all about. So we know that Medicare and Medicaid covers health care costs, but what's the definition of home care services, and what does it look like today? Ben?
Yeah, so right now, home care services are already provided through the Medicaid system to people who are low income. And the main purpose of all these services is to make sure people have help with the activities of daily living. That's the technical term for what it takes to stay at home. So somebody comes to your home and basically does a little bit of inventory, and they say, do you need help bathing? Do you need help dressing? What do you need around the house to help make sure that you can stay in their home? My grandparents just went through this, and they had a washer-dryer hookup that was only downstairs, and that walk down the stairs was the main thing that was actually going to force them to sell their whole house. So if you get a little intervention, somebody who can actually come and help make sure that you don't have to do that flight of stairs alone, that can be enough to actually keep that whole house, all that wealth that generation has stored up in the family. So those services mean different things to different people, and the key word here is flexibility. You want to have a program that is designed to be tailored to make sure that what people have access to early on, that preventative care, basically helps them stay in their home so they don't have to have that more expensive facility care later on that pushes them away from their friends and family.
Great, thanks. Newell, any thoughts on that?
I would just add, I actually, for the last 7 years, have represented the Home Care and Hospice Alliance in the state, the group that provides care to more than 20, 30,000 people every year. And actually, the Medicaid program does have a number of benefits, but there also are some benefits outside of that. The Homemaker program is one that serves about 2,000 people a year and provides about 10 hours of home care a month. Could we be doing more in that respect? Sure. But just to pull it back to Ben's point, or if I could take issue with it, the idea of setting up program that's run by a board that's going to be handing out services to millionaires who do not even live in the state of Maine, who are not residents of the state of Maine, is not a plan or a program. It's government waste, and that's one of the reasons why the Home Care Alliance, Home Care and Hospice Alliance, along with a number of other not-for-profits who provide services along the continuum, including most recently the Maine Association of Community Service Providers, who have also joined our coalition, are opposed to question 1 for just that reason.
Let's pick up on that for a sec. You say non-resident or visitors receiving services. What do you mean by that? And Ben, I know you'll have something to say.
I do, yeah. Could I jump in here?
Yeah, why don't you?
Yeah, so just to say, I think we can have it one or two ways here. We can either complain about wealthy people paying taxes, or we can complain about the fact that they're using the system, but you can't complain about both. The reason why it's fair for wealthy people to access the system is because we need a basic public health infrastructure like we have for Medicare, like we have for roads, like we have for public education. And so absolutely, I agree with you. If the premise of your question is, yeah, if you have a little bit more, should you be giving a little bit more? 100% agree. That's why we need to do it through the tax code.
I would just point out that over the last 8 years, I believe the amount of taxes that Maine people pay has gone up about $600 million. And while the rate may have gone down, the amount of taxes has gone up. But if this question passes, we're going to have the highest income tax bracket in the nation for anyone, any family, by the way, making over $128,400 a year. But getting back to the point of the infrastructure, could we be doing more for under the Homemaker program or other similar programs to expand the access? Absolutely. But the idea that we're going to set up a 9-member board unaccountable to any state agency to spend money providing a service to people who can otherwise afford it is not smart government. It is a waste of money. And that's why the no vote is the right vote on this, Ben.
Yeah, so if I may, talked about the board a couple of times. So one will say that a huge number of services are already delivered through boards that are independent of the legislature right now. Many folks in the room would be familiar with the Finance Authority of Maine, or Maine State Housing, or the Lobster Board, or the Maine Potato Board. All of these operate with similar functions.
The Potato Board.
And just to let me finish, Mel. Thank you so much. Just say too, in terms of like economic impact, like what is really hurting Maine families? I can't help but think about a care worker I know in Lewiston who is in an abusive relationship that she cannot leave because she cannot make enough money. She spends her day working with 3 different clients, one of whom has a brain injury that gives that client suicidal ideation. Another has Down syndrome, suffering from PTSD, is nonverbal and sometimes violent. Okay? This is the reality of what most Maine families are experiencing. 6 out of 10 people in Maine are or currently have been family caregivers. And at the end of the day, we do absolutely have a choice to make over who we are prioritizing. If you look at the median tax paid by the average Maine family, Maine ranks 26. We are exactly in the middle. We do not have any uniquely high tax burden. What we do have is uniquely high.
Passes.
Well, what we do absolutely have is uniquely high population of people who are aging, and we just have to make a choice.
I don't dispute that we have a high aging population. We have the highest aging population, in fact. But let me step back. The Maine Potato Board, folks, is a trade association that spends roughly $1 million a year, and the people who pay into it actually have a say in how the money is spent. That is not the scheme that you have created here. You're creating a 9-person board authorized to spend $310 million of taxpayer funds, and it is not accountable to the taxpayers who are paying for it. It's not even accountable to our elected officials. And that is a real problem. And not only that, going back to the issue on the impact on families, there are going to be 60,000 Maine families that are going to be hit with this. And that's not even considering all the S-corps, all the LLCs, all the partnerships. I don't need to prove to this audience that are going to be hit by this tax. And the net effect of that, the almost $2 billion worth of lost income to the state economy in the next 5 years, is going to be absolutely brutal to our economy.
Well, I'm glad you used the word accountability, Newell, because this is another great thing.
I'm glad I did too, actually.
Yeah. This is actually my favorite part about this board's proposal is First of all, it is absolutely accountable to taxpayers because if this passes, it will have been taxpayers in November who affirmatively vote for it. There aren't a lot of taxes on the book that can say that. Second of all, if you are accessing services right now through Medicare or Medicaid and you don't like how that's happening, if you pick up the phone, you're going to talk to a bureaucrat somewhere, you're going to be put on hold for a while. This proposal actually allows the stakeholders who are a part of this system, consumers, workers, and the businesses that are administering this program on the ground, to elect their members to this board. So if you have an issue with how it's operating, if you think there's some nuance on the ground that you want changed, the board is directly accountable to the stakeholders in that system. One of the reasons why Maine has fallen behind over the last 20 years is legislators and appropriations have unfortunately played political football with this program. They've skimmed off the top in order to balance budgets. This would make sure that there's a board.
That's not true.
Okay.
I've been at the front line of fights for the Home Care and Hospice Alliance over the last 5 years. We have increased reimbursement rates over $16 million, and the vast majority of those funds have gone to worker pay. Now, is that...
Well, hold on. What wage does that equal?
Hold on a second.
What are workers making with that reimbursement?
I'm not going to dispute that there's more work that we can do, but the idea that you are going to tax 60,000 Maine families and with an impact of over $2 billion to the economy, to set up a program for people that's going to be providing services to people who can otherwise afford it is not a plan. It's a government waste, and it's not even accountable to government. That's the whole point.
Well, again, to me, the government is the people. To me, the government is democracy. The government is those who we elect. And it's true that, yes, the top 2%
who are not
going
to be able to have any say in how this program is
It's true
run.
that the top 2% in Maine are going to have to be paid a little bit more, and that will only happen if the majority of Maine people decide that that is the right thing to do.
Let me move
Can I take issue with just one thing? Because I thought we had some level of agreement on this, that this tax is a tax on Maine families. It is not a tax on individuals. The way you've crafted it with the three. Hold on. Let me finish, because this is very critical for not just their understanding, but probably your understanding. That 1.9% tax on employees, a 1.9% tax on the employer of those employees, but the 3.8% catch-all tax is a tax on the taxpayer. And the taxpayer can be a married couple. That is how it can be defined. And I think you do a disservice to the discussion that we're trying to have when you continue to say it's that small percentage. If you want to,
I got your point, but here's the thing: you're a very talented lobbyist.
If you want to say the wealthy or the well-to-do, or you come up with a word for it, but when you try to define it with a percentage that is factually incorrect, that does no service to a thoughtful discussion.
Hold on, just to take a minute to respond here, because Newell is a very talented lobbyist, and he knows that the controlling authority on how we're supposed to read bills is the Office of Fiscal and Program Review, the nonpartisan Office of Fiscal and Program Review, which is the only nonpartisan office who has reviewed this, who created a fiscal note that was on the front page of a petition signed by over 70,000 Mainers. And very clearly on that fiscal note, it says explicitly this is a tax on individual income over $128,400. When we say that this is being disputed, beware of the passive voice. Who is doing the disputing? The only sources that are remotely credible to this get tied back to the governor and his political appointees.
That's not true.
Okay,
that's not true.
If I may dive in here for a sec. Am I correct that this has gone to the Attorney General and that we're expecting a ruling from her by the end of September?
I know Maine Revenue Services came out with a report, and both Jerome Gerard and Mike Allen have been with Maine Revenue.
Who are political appointees.
I think since Percival Baxter was governor, they've been working at Maine Revenue Services. But just for your benefit, this is the document that's actually linked to your press release that talks about, that you guys have a link to, which is from OFPR, and it designates at the bottom of the second paragraph $310 million annually. There's no way you can get that kind of money out of just individuals. So, that's a tax on families, Ben. And it's not just.
All right, I just underline this section.
It's not just me.
Individuals will pay 3.8% of Maine adjusted gross income.
Okay.
So I mean, if you have an issue with how OFPR is doing the math, you can definitely take that up with OFPR.
Yeah.
But we both know the tax analyst who helped them write this, and she's a very well-respected person, and this is their description of what the policy does.
Yeah. Well, and if I could go back, since we're dropping the L word here, the Maine People's Alliance has also a very talented lobbyist, much more talented than I am. And back in April, when the group of folks that I'm working with asked the legislature for a public hearing on this, the Maine People's Alliance lobbyist was very actively and successfully lobbied against a public hearing from taking place, which would have been a fantastic time to have a discussion on just how many people are going to be hit by this tax and who those people are. But your group successfully blocked that.
Let me move back to a question that was raised earlier about qualifications. Basically, anybody over the age of 65. The question about residency, is that addressed in any way?
It
Yes,
isn't, and
it's very clear. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. You can read the bill for yourself. It says you have to be a resident of Maine to qualify.
No, it doesn't say that. It says you have to live in Maine. Residency is a legal term of art, and it means that you are here in the state of Maine with intent to stay in the state of Maine. Your document, which you drafted, does not say resident. It says living in Maine, which means that someone who could come here from Massachusetts, spend July and August in Bar Harbor in a very nice house, and access services to get their home repaired or get a trip to the grocery store if they have only one activity of daily living. And while I'm on that point...
Well, okay, hold on.
I'll step back.
Yeah, just one thing. I mean, I don't think it's very exciting for us to just read bill language to you. I mean, I encourage everybody to just check out this language for yourself.
Well, that's important because that's what's actually going to become the law.
Yeah, no, and I feel very confident on this residency point. So, I mean, but I think this issue of moving is worth talking about because, again, I think the big problem our state faces is not a huge number of people who are coming to Maine, which by the way, I know from the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce website, one of your plans for sustainable growth is attracting more people to the region. So just setting that aside for 1 second, people are moving because they actually have to take care of their family members. There's a woman my age who had to move to Belfast now. She's 33. She has a mother with dementia. She's in that gap. Her mother does not qualify for Medicaid. They cannot afford a nursing home. She has put her entire career on hold to move from where she could find gainful employment to be with her mother. That is a real human impact. It's a real economic impact. If you want to talk about moving and you want to talk about residency, let's talk about the issues that are actually driving people to move and lose their homes.
Let me dive in with another data point. This morning's paper was interesting. It was announced today that Maine remains the oldest state in the nation for median age, 44.6 years of age, just a year younger than I am.
Me too.
You're making it up.
But that in 2016, we had 204,000 Mainers age 65 or over. And I believe it was the Maine Bureau of Labor Statistics said that, that being 2016, in 2018 we have 8 years to go before we get to 2026, that the estimated population of those over the age of 65 will be 317,000 Mainers, or roughly a 35% increase over 2 years ago. So this is the question, and this is sort of, back to the fundamentals. I think you both acknowledge that we have an issue. There's no question about it. But can we afford to serve that many people, and can we afford not to?
I'd take that because I know with the Home Care and Hospice Alliance, through the various programs where we provide work, we've got in any given month about 5,000 to 6,000 hours of unfilled time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean people aren't getting the service, but if they're assessed for 25 hours, they may only be getting 15. And frankly, that's where we need to put a lot of our focus. A lot of that really has to do with attracting or creating more of a vocation for home-based care workers rather than the turnover we see. But again, I think Maine people generally would agree that we want to keep that focus on our most needy and also the most acute, so that the people who actually need the care are getting it. And when you talk about the levels of acuity in Maine, we do a very good job here of keeping people out of nursing homes relative to the rest of the nation. Excuse me. We require a higher degree of acuity before you were allowed to go into a nursing home. And so we have those investments, and we try to make those investments in home-based care. But again, it's focused on those who need the benefit and who cannot afford the benefit. Whereas if you're going to set up a $310 million a year program on a board, we haven't even gotten into the discussions on the massive amount of power this board has with literally no oversight from any government agency to provide services to people who can otherwise afford it, is not a plan for addressing this problem in any respect.
So I want to make sure we hit the workforce piece of this, because we talked about the wages a little bit earlier. And I think that's the key piece, because I know workforce development is a priority that many of us share. And I know we've also got a lot of fans of the free market who are here in the room today. And to be clear, home care workers right now are making minimum wage or just a little bit above. And the work that they are doing is some of the most physically and emotionally demanding work that a person could do. I mean, literally lifting 200-pound human bodies on the one hand, and 100% people skills, managing people in the most intimate time they have. That is extremely challenging work. And if you are getting paid minimum wage or just a little bit above it, it is impossible to expect people to retain that as a career when there are far easier ways to make minimum wage or just above it. The only way we're going to move forward building this workforce, which is the fastest growing workforce in Maine, and others, is if we continue to have wages that are raised. The only way to do that is by putting more money into the system. And as business owners, that is just the reality. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions. So that's why this is just a clear decision about priorities. The money is already on the table. We're already shelling out $400 million a year for these extra tax breaks. If we just take about half of that back, we have enough to make a huge dent in this issue going forward.
It's interesting. I think the election of 2016 sort of brought home that elections have consequences. No matter where you are on the spectrum, a lot has changed. So I'm going to ask you both to put on your Karnak the Magnificent turbans. That's Johnny Carson, Ben, I know.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. I'm 45. Yeah. So, but for both of you, and this is
it's like the Jimmy Fallon letters thing.
Oh, okay, I get it now. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Who? So if Maine becomes the first in the nation to offer these services at no charge and levies an additional tax to fund it, what changes do you foresee in the population and the economy? What does Maine look like in 10 years after this has been implemented?
Well, I could jump in on that if I could. One of the points that the state economist made was that the labor force is going to be hit by about 1,500 people leaving the state of Maine. At the very moment when we want to attract younger people here and keep businesses here. I suspect there are going to be a lot of people from outside the state of Maine who will show up here looking to take advantage of this benefit. And I don't think that's going to be very good for our economy, because we already have issues of manpower shortage that we're trying to work on, and we actually had some other legislation, had nothing to do with money, on LD 925 that was focused on that. We're going to be drinking from not just the fire hose, but from all of Casco Bay if we have 100,000 people who are going to be eligible overnight for this service, not to mention all the folks who might move here to take advantage of it.
Ben, what's the other side of the economics here?
Yeah, so here's what I would say Maine looks like. If you are this small business owner in York County and you are having to choose between taking care of your mother and redeveloping a mill, you will now be able to have somebody help you take care of the mother so that you are able to use your savings and actually invest them into the local economy. You'll be able to realize that dream of redeveloping your community because you won't have to worry that every single dollar that you and your mother have saved will be drained away through end-of-life care. There's no one out there since the passage of Medicare who has doubted that comprehensive long-term care benefits absolutely need to be a part of a healthcare system. The question is, how do we get there? And the only way we get there is by being willing to lead. I mean, that is Dirigo. That is the whole thing that makes Maine great. We have a let's do it ability that allows us to step out there and make things happen. That's what this question one is all about. It's about taking the first step. And what I imagine you will see is that once Maine takes that first step, and Hawaii actually did a very similar thing, by the way, with family caregivers recently. Other states
It's
will
not
follow
similar.
along.
It's a day program. It was a pilot that they now are no longer funding. Can I just add something to that, which is nobody anywhere in America has tried or even discussed a program like this. And there's a difference between I lead and I'm stupid. I mean, if you're going.
Sorry, do you want to direct that actually at me, or do you want to just kind of throw that out there?
I'm looking at the lights more than anything. There's a difference between having a thoughtful discussion about this and moving forward with a plan that has never been tried before. And I would just say, in all those times when I've been at the legislature having these discussions, I've never seen you there in those discussions. It would have been good to have this before you'd gathered the signatures and put this plan forward, because no one has ever tried anything like this before. And one other point, Tony, I just want to jump in or add, because we haven't discussed it. No one would ever design a program to help elder and disabled adults while at the same time taking their private medical information and their contact information and distributing that to hundreds, if not thousands of people without their permission. And that is no part of any program. And that's one of the reasons why the Home Care and Hospice Alliance was unanimously opposed to this. That patient-provider relationship is built on trust. And when the private health information, of the people we're serving is sent out to other folks without their permission, that destroys that relationship. And no one would ever design a home care program that has that aspect included in it.
Okay, Ben?
Yeah, so
got 2 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, on the private health information, that's the second time you brought it up. This is another thing where I think people can just read the bill and decide on their own. Judith Lichtman, who actually helped write HIPAA, which is the controlling privacy law for this, has a really great quote on your FAQ sheet. And I mean, she's checked this, everybody's checked this. There's 4 separate confidentiality provisions. There's no exchange of private health information out to the public.
You don't dispute that the board is going to give
I do dispute that. There is no private health information ever disclosed to the public.
What do you understand that private health information includes your receipt
So,
of the
Newell, I
service?
think that's the 3rd time you've insinuated that I'm stupid. And I'd like to speak to that for a second here, too. Because I think it's really important that if we're going to have a conversation about the future of our state, that we at least show each other a bare amount of respect. And I think that it's completely fine for you to represent yourself as an experienced person who's done a lot of great things in committees in the legislature. I would only ask that you evaluate this policy, and this would be my ask for all of you. Evaluate it on the merits and recognize that, yes, this is absolutely an ambitious proposal, but also ask yourself, this aging population that we have requires ambition. And ask yourself if we are offering policy proposals that actually meet the scale of the challenge that we face. For too long in Augusta, we have contented ourselves with small bore answers to really big problems. And that is the true source of why ballot measures are happening. I would much rather be waking up and giving my kids breakfast right now. But I'm not doing that because I know that me and the people that I love and care most about in this world are going to depend on having systems like here in place in 2030. And unless we begin to act now and act at a scale that will actually make a difference, that simply isn't going to happen. We don't have time for more partisan games in committee. So let's absolutely have a debate, but the thing that's going to make this one win or lose happen best moving forward to set us up for success is at least a little bit of respect that we can show each other out here, even if that can't happen in the state
and
house.
I would just say, if you have taken my comment to insinuate that you or anyone you're working with is stupid, I withdraw that and apologize for it. But what I would insinuate is that I don't think you guys have actually read the document or understanding the document that you're now putting before the voters. And if you look at that line that I've highlighted there, it says, the department shall provide to the board lists of all persons eligible to vote within constituency categories, that would include patients, recipients of the service, including names, addresses, and email addresses to the board, and then from the board to the constituency organizations. And the fact that I receive the service is private health information. I can't call up your doctor's office and say, hey, is Ben Chin a patient there? And so the minute and nor should I, but when the department then gives that information to the board, who then gives it to the constituency organizations, that's a violation of patient privacy. And Judith Lichtman, I don't know what you guys explained to her, but I think her own, I went and checked her own CV on the website of the National Partnership for Women and Families, acknowledges that she was involved in HIPAA with respect to the portability of insurance for women and their children, not that she was involved in the discussion of privacy. HIPAA was that piece of legislation was a huge piece of legislation, and frankly, what Judith Lichtman's position on it is irrelevant to what actually is going to happen to patient privacy and patient privacy rights as a result. And
15 seconds.
And
Okay.
I'll wrap up. And I say that only because if the intention here is to help elder and disabled adults, you would never set up a scheme and put a provision like that in the scheme if you really were serious about helping elder and disabled adults.
Okay, Ben, 15 seconds.
Yeah, my 15-second thing would be, you can read this for yourself. What Newell's basically talking about is a way for people to receive mailing information about the program for the purpose of these board elections. There's 4 separate confidentiality provisions to make sure this stuff doesn't reach the public. And at the very most, all we're talking about is contact information. And the other thing that you had highlighted here was that you can opt out of all of this. If you don't want to receive any information about anything, you don't have to.
And HIPAA does not allow for an opt-out.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you.
No, I'm just saying,
I said
HIPAA
that
doesn't allow for an
about
opt-out.
15 seconds, so let's do this. It is time for our friends with the microphones to weigh in, and with, again, questions, please. So let's start on the far side over here.
Hi, Rachel Reed, Remax Shoreline, and I really wasn't planning on asking anything today, but my question is directed to Ben. Ben, don't you think that there are some less expensive, more pragmatic solutions to many of the problems that you have posed? So, for example, do we really need $310 million to be devoted to practical solutions? So, for example, for your grandmother, honestly, how much does it cost to move the washer dryer upstairs? Do we have to, I think we don't have to think in terms of ultimatums. Is it really not possible for the woman with the mill to get an investment group together for her renovations, or a small business loan? And if it's not, shouldn't there be some play of supply and demand?
Thank you, Rachel.
This is a great question. So just a couple proof points. And this first one, Newell will agree with, that home care services are by far the most cost-effective form of intervention that you can have for folks in this situation. And all I would say is that there is no question that these costs are going to be expended either way, right? The question is, are families going to be alone when they're having to deal with these, or do we have a collective responsibility to make sure that no one is burdened with such a huge cost at the end of the life that they can't pay it for themselves?
Okay, next question.
Oh, is this on?
That's
Can you
on.
hear me? Okay. I am a parent of 2 young professionals, my daughter-in-law and my son. One is a pharmacist at Northeastern, or was, and now she's working for Hannaford. My son is a designer for Cole Haan. They both went to school for 5 or 6 years, and Northeastern's about $60 grand a year. They didn't qualify for very much financial aid because of our income. We missed the boat on that, my husband and I. So my son.
And your question, because we've got a lot of folks.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is, if you allow, well, first of all, I want to say that they're paying about $4 grand a month for their student loans for the next 20 years. Okay? That's the price you pay when you're a professional.
Okay, the question.
Yep. Okay. If you're attracting people to Maine that are coming for services, and you're losing young professionals who can't afford that extra tax because their school loans are astronomical, how can we survive if we lose our professionals and gain people that are using the services?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think all of those insecurities that you pointed out that are the reasons why families have a hard time balancing the budget are why leaving families on their own to deal with enormous end-of-life care costs, that's exactly why we need to have this in place. Not just for poor people, not just for middle-income people, but for upper-middle-class people like the ones that you're talking about, who absolutely are professionals, but they are not going to be able to afford to drop $100,000 a year on a nursing home.
Lou? No?
Personally, the question was, they can't afford that increase in their taxes.
Okay,
They can't
thank you.
afford it.
Got it. Lou?
We can take the next question. I wasn't sure if I
Over
needed
here.
to comment there. I don't want everyone to gang up on Ben with questions, though, so I
Don't
will
worry,
take
I'll
it.
Heaven
alleviate
forbid.
that.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's be even-handed here.
Hello, is this on?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So my name's Phoebe Shields, and if you don't mind indulging me, I do have a question, of course, and I will get to it, but it's important to hear my story.
Quickly,
Very
please.
quickly, I'll talk fast. I am a social work student at the University of Southern Maine, and I am a home care worker. And I'm one of the youngest people in this room, and I am very afraid right now to speak in front of you. I think that the point of this today is not to prove each other wrong. We all have the same values, I believe. We all love the state of Maine. We all love our elders, and we want to provide for one another. I think that's undisputed. And Ben, I think you're right. I think he's a great lobbyist. I think, no, you're a great lobbyist because you're inciting what you need to do to prove your point. And it's fear. The word scam incites that, and I am scared right now because I'm a home care worker. I'm going there right after this. She's 86, and we're going to have a fantastic day.
We need a question, please.
I'll give you a question.
Okay.
What are you going to do for me if this doesn't work out? Because I don't make a lot. I'm living at home. I'm paying for school, and I need help, and I don't know what to do.
And first of all, thank you for that work and for the question. And I would say, first of all, that over the last 5 years, the Home Care and Hospice Alliance has been at the front lines of this discussion legislatively to raise reimbursement rates for, and specifically for workers like Phoebe and others across the state who are providing this care every day. And we were successful in recently, over the last 3 years, in raising those rates $16 million. The vast amount of that money has gone towards workers. Is that all we should be doing? Absolutely not. And one of the other things we've been doing is trying to create, there's a piece of legislation that was also passed this year that didn't have any fiscal note attached to it, that focused on trying to create more of a vocation for home care workers so that it wasn't going to be a kind of a turnover, which is also a problem. And we need to be attracting more workers into that profession because, as we all agree, we're going to be all of us are going to be getting older, and there's going to be an increasing demand for the service. Where I would take issue with Ben's proposal is that the current structure that we have, Phoebe, is actually pretty good in terms of how we do home care vis-a-vis other states in the country. Down south, I think the number of reports would suggest that they have a lot more work to do to get to where we are. Now, does that mean that we should sit quietly where we are? No, absolutely not. And I think that we need to have that discussion, but I wouldn't. But this is not a solution to that.
Do you have a proposal for me?
Say again?
I apologize. I wasn't clear on my question. Right now, what I'm going through, it's not working. I was wondering if you have a directive or some kind of direction.
So what I would, yeah, absolutely. So we have two programs that actually are outside the state Medicaid program, outside of what the federal government will help support. One is a state-funded homemaker program that bumps up the income and eligibility limits and asset test. And then also, I think I mentioned earlier, the homemaker program, and that actually expands the service to more people. Now, one of the other aspects of that is making sure that we can pay workers a wage that allows them to continue to serve in this area. And we've been working for, the Home Care and Hospice Alliance has been in existence for 3 decades at least, doing this and advocating for just those kinds of issues.
Okay.
But the way to do that is through the normal legislative process, not by setting up a $310 million plan, or I should say a tax, that's going to be run by 9 people who are not elected or not accountable to any state agency.
Back to the questions over here.
Hi, my name is Valerie Kazarian. I too am from USM. I also qualify for the services that you've been talking about. I'm also a reporter with Free Press at USM, so I'm wearing a number of hats here today. My question is actually a follow-up of my fellow student. What are you going to do? This is for each of you. What specifically are you going to do should this fail? And I'm looking at Mr. Chamber of Commerce and thinking, are you going to, Mr. Lobbyist, Mr. Conservative, are you going to begin to work with the universities to strengthen nursing and healthcare programs and helping with tuition? And Mr. Liberal, what are you going to do
Guilty.
should this fail to provide the services for the increasing numbers of seniors, which apparently everyone agrees is an inevitability?
Great. Thank you very much. And good question, Glenn.
Would now be the time to say I voted for Hillary, or?
And for the minimum wage, right?
I think that, first of all, if it fails, I think that, and we hope it will fail, and not just by a small majority, a small margin. I think by 20 points, and we need to be able to send a message to some of the out-of-state interests that are funding the yes side. But more to the point, we're going to be back at the legislature in January with a bill to increase the reimbursement rates yet again. I think that's the first place I would start. I think the second place I would start is trying to expand the homemaker program so that more people can get access to home-based care services beyond those who are receiving it now. And I think also some of the work that we're doing that we have begun several years ago to try to focus on creating a vocation for home care workers in Maine rather than the turnover that we see, because we're going to need to be ready as people age.
Great. Ben?
Really appreciate the question. I think that no matter what, we're in this for the long haul. And I agree that there's a lot of small things that have been out there. So we've supported the housing bond. We've supported these reimbursement rate increases that Noel has mentioned. We've supported expansion of property tax fairness credit that also allows people to stay in their home. I think the challenge that we're going to have to face, though, is at some point, to Phoebe's point, we do need to get around to the fact that we're just paying workers at an order of magnitude that just isn't appropriate. And there does need to be some jump, some there, somehow. The other thing is, these bills that Noel's talking about, the general fund programs that expand eligibility just a little bit above the poverty level, there haven't been access expansions to those since, I think, at least the 90s. So we absolutely, can do other things, but the question is, what is the yardstick by which we're measuring success? And I would submit to you that if the yardstick we're using is the same one that we've been using for the last 20 years that has gotten us into this place, that is not adequate, and at some point we do need to take a jump.
Let me just offer an answer to your question as well as and a plug. The education bonds that are going to be on the ballot include substantial funding for new nurses in the state of Maine, so keep your eyes open. And one last question right here.
Great, thank you very much. My name's Adam Zuckerman. I'm the director of the Maine Small Business Coalition. We represent 4,000 small business owners across the state, and I have a really quick two-part question. The first part is, Ben, if you could answer, many of our members have to decide between caring for their elderly parents or for disabled children and running their business. And that's been a major impediment as they're looking to create and grow their businesses. And Newell, I have a question for you as well. So I've spoken with several members of the Home Care and Hospice Alliance that you, I guess, represent. And you've said many times throughout the discussion that they unanimously voted to oppose this referendum measure.
Yes, the board did, yes.
And none of the members that I spoke with said that they were at all consulted or had any kind of vote on this. So could you explain that, I guess, why you keep saying that they unanimously supported it when many of them were not consulted?
15 seconds for each of you, please.
You want to start? The Home Care and Hospice Alliance board unanimously voted to oppose the referendum for all the reasons I discussed. Not setting aside the tax issue for a second, Adam. The privacy issue was one of the real reasons why they were most opposed to this.
Great, thank you. Ben?
Yeah, so I just say the number one thing this will do for small businesses is just help that central problem of time management. We should also remember, too, that some of the fastest growing small businesses are home care agencies themselves. And Newell represents mostly the larger kind, but Holding Hands, Ocean Home Health, Gateway Community Services, Community Home Health Care, Global Home Health, and Agility Enterprise are all supporting this ballot measure.
All right. We've come to the end of the question period, and as I promised, we'll give 2 minutes to each of you to wrap. If you want to do it in less time, please do, because we try to get out by 9 o'clock.
Well, thank you again, Tony. Thanks to all of you. Thank you to Ben for spirited discussion. I hope all of you come away this morning with an understanding of really some of the issues behind the actual ballot question itself. I think I'm speaking to a group that understands the impact of Maine having the highest income tax in the nation, but also, and the impact that would have on our economy and all of the small mom and pop businesses that are part of our coalition that are going to be hit by this. But also, I hope you can step away, because you're all involved in your communities, and I think can be real messengers of what else is behind this proposal. The fact that elder and disabled adults are going to have their private health information distributed to hundreds, if not thousands, of people without their permission. And an opt-out is not in the bill, nor is it allowable under HIPAA in this circumstance. The fact that the board that's going to be administering the $310 million is unelected by the people who are paying for that program and unaccountable to any state agency. The fact that, we hardly even discussed it, that all independent home care workers in the state of Maine, if question 1 passes, will become state employees subject to state employee dues, or fees, excuse me, and without any of the state benefits. So that is why we are and we are leading the coalition to oppose question 1, and I appreciate your support in November.
Very good. Thank you. Ben?
I want to close by talking about a guy who was a veteran who served this country, and his mother was from Washington County, where he grew up digging clams. And she was a postmaster. She actually worked a pretty good job. And at the end of her life, she could not afford to stay in her home. And this veteran, although he had served his country, was willing to sacrifice his body and his very life for all of us, had to deal with the fact that at the end of his mother's life, he was not able to provide for her when she wasn't able to provide for herself. She ended up going into a nursing home that was far enough away from him that he was not there when she died. If you've ever had a loved one in this situation and you get the call where it's a hospital and there's only 6 months left to live, and then you have to deal with the fact that there is not enough money in the bank to provide that person what they need, that is the worst feeling. It is the greatest stress any human being can experience. That is why we have the urgency of tackling this problem at the magnitude that it requires. It's why I will be thinking about those people, those Mainers, when I go to vote on this on November, and I urge you all to vote yes on 1.
Great. Thank you, Ben. I'll wrap with one of my favorite sayings. Democracy is like a muscle. It works best when it's exercised. November 6th or before, by absentee ballot, please vote. And we will see you next month. And Jack, the microphone's back to you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And trouble walking. Thank you, Ben and Newell. That was fantastic. And I'd just be very brief. I want to say that in deference to your presentations today, the Chamber is going to be making a donation to the Maine Children's Home for Wanderers. So thank you again for being here today. Great debate. Thank you. Stay up to date with the Chamber by subscribing to our newsletter, our advocacy newsletter, and Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. We shall see you back here on Wednesday, October 3rd, when we will have all 4 gubernatorial candidates in a debate. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.